Welcome everybody. I'm Susan Garcia with the Nanaimo Historical Society, and we're doing our Departure Bay tour today. We have Dave Bodaly from Snuneymuxw Nation who will start the tour, and then we have Ted Lord who's going to take over after that. People are welcome to just join in, walk along. It's not going to be a long walk, it's just going to be down the sidewalk and with a couple of stops. So it won't be down on the beach, but of course, you're welcome to go down there afterwards and look at things from a different perspective. The people that are on the board of directors all have lanyards like this. So if you have some questions for us, you're welcome to just approach somebody and ask them. We also have membership forms if you're interested afterwards. And I'll turn it over to David. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dave Bodaly. Is there anyone here that would recognize that they might be of First Nations, Métis, or Inuit ancestry somewhere in your ancestry? Welcome. Do you know where from?
The Capel Valleys.
Nice. Welcome. Anyone else that may have that First Nations? Yes. Do you know where from?
Newfoundland.
Welcome. It's so nice to have it. In our cultural way, it's always nice to recognize people that have connections to other First Nations or Métis or Inuit ancestry. My traditional name is Lachea, and I come from the Johnny family here. We're standing at the Spirit Portal carved by James Johnny. James Johnny's dad, James Johnny Sr., his grandfather and my grandfather were brothers. So we have a lot of connections to each other. The village name we're at is called Cilaire. When the Europeans arrived, Captain Vancouver arrived, there was already over 10,000 people living here. This is Nanaimo. So we went by canoe out to greet him in his tall ship in the inner harbor, and he asked, "What place is this?" Nanaimo. Oh, Nanaimo. That's where Nanaimo comes from. It didn't come from the lady who made the little squares. But I'm going to sing what we call our Snuneymuxw welcome song. And it's what we do at the first gathering of any time. And then I'll give an interpretation of it at the end of it. So feel free, you can take some pictures of this. It's always part of that. And it's an honor. It'd be nice to see some of those pictures back again too. So I'll give you the interpretation after this. In our cultural language, we would translate that to, we're so happy that you're able to be here. We're so happy that you're able to join us in our celebration today. In our cultural way, when we're thankful, you bring your hands in front of you with your thumbs upward, shake it twice and say, Haitshka. Haitshka means thank you in our language. Haitseemka for each of you coming here to join us today. Susan.
Would you like me to?
Yeah, okay. So these portals here were carved in 2008, and I had the opportunity to be traveling on what we call the tribal journeys, and I was arriving in the harbor when the tide was quite close up here, and the poles had just been unveiled earlier that day. So it was a real honor for me to come home and see this after I'd been a week up in the north part of the island and gradually traveling this way. We were on our way towards Duncan in 2008, but it was very neat to be part of that. Okay. Yep.
So I'm just going to present Dave with our token of our thanks for running the tour today. And thank you very much. Hi,
Turn it over to Ted.
Okay, so I'm going to take it over now. And we've got 3 stops, I think it is. We'll start here, and I'll give you a bit of an oversight for the what you can see from this area, and then we have a couple more stops, and we'll end up at the far end. So from here, you probably know of the development that's called Cilaire, which is on the right over here. So where did that name come from? Well, originally that was a powder works. It was called the Hamilton Powder Works. Yeah, louder. Okay. So
Come in closer, perhaps.
yeah, one coming a bit closer maybe. As well.
It doesn't have a loud voice.
So if you look over there to my right, to behind a lot of you, that's where there used to be a big powder works. Oh yeah, let's do that. Yeah.
Oh, so Ted has some maps of what we're going to be talking about, which I'll just pass around and people can take one if they want. It might fly away, so up to you guys.
And I should add before we start that most of the information has come from these 3 books. Which,
Departure Bay, Carol Davidson.
so if you want to thumb through them, then Susan's got them, and she'll lend them to you, and then pass them around and give them back maybe. And then they're very difficult to get hold of, some of these, so probably you'll have to find them in the second-hand bookshop. It was but they did, I understand, export it as well. So,
You're finding.
It was a powder for dynamite, basically, blasting.
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. Dylan, our new member.
and I'd like to say, feel free to add anything to my comments. There's some people here that I know probably know more about the topic.
Yeah, we might want to add the horrendous explosion that happened there. It wasn't on par with the Halifax explosion, but
yeah,
nearly.
There were several explosions. Yeah. No.
So when we get there, maybe invite
Yeah.
Daryl.
But did you want to say more about that right now, Daryl? About the explosions?
Well, there were explosions that happened in at that site. They had to carry nitroglycerin in a wagon, and en route, there's a bumpy road. All that area was designated for the powder plant. And one of the worst explosions, the wagon blew up. No trace of the wagon or the driver or the horse or anything. And one of the railroad tracks that went to that site was wrapped around a tree twice. Almost in a spiral. Yeah, a full-size railroad track. And I think it blew out a lot of windows in downtown Nanaimo. When
was the explosion?
Oh, gee. Okay. It would have to be late 1800s. Christine might know. 1903? Oh, okay.
Early
1903. Yeah.
But eventually, the name of the business that was there became the Canadian Industries Limited. And then when that land was then eventually sold for development, the developer decided to call it Cilaire. So that's how it got its name, Cilaire. CIL, the first 3 letters of Cilaire, were the Canadian Industries Limited. And you can, I'm going to pass this around, so this shows you the dock. Which way should we send this way?
Okay.
So that shows you the dock that used to be there for the powder works. And then the second one I'm going to pass around is a current photograph from the water, and you can see the remains of some of these structures that were part of the part of the explosives.
At the end of the story, he ends up at James Bay, just off of Sydney. They moved the operation from here to there, and they thought that was safer. They had their own island, and actually the Potter Works and the village, the private village, the company town, operated until the 80s. That's all I know for now. That's in my position.
So we're just going to skim the surface on the various topics. So the next thing, and you'll see it on your map, I want to just quickly talk about the ferry terminal. So the Blackpool ferry, back in, I think it was 1961, was it? They started a ferry service, a car and passenger service from here, from Departure Bay over to Horseshoe Bay. And I believe now that original ferry terminal is what is now called Berth 2 at the ferry. And what is particularly interesting, they did bring up an old ferry, but they converted it to be a roll-on, roll-off. So just like we do now, you drive on and then you drive off. And according to the information, that was the first one of that time. And if you're interested, I'll pass these around. Here's an aerial shot, thanks to the Nanaimo archives, of the original Blackpool ferry operating out of here. And I've also got a photo of a panel that's down on the waterfront near the Lighthouse Bistro. There's a number of panels describing the vessels which have a history connected to Nanaimo. And it was called the Carloki was the first ferry that Blackpool operated. And then, as you know, there came a time when BC Ferries or BC Ferries Corporation. So now we're going to look over towards Salish or Newcastle Island. A lot of interesting history over there.
That's an understatement.
So, for those who have binoculars, you can look out over there and you can still see the remains of 4 herring salteries that were located over there. And there was also the Nanaimo shipyard, basically opposite where the Bracken Point is. And what I understand is that, well, there's a history, as you know, regarding the Second World War. And so after that, they were sold off, the salteries and the shipyard, and demolished, burnt down. But my understanding is that one of the marine railways from the shipyard went down to the shipyard down on the Newcastle Channel. And if you look on Google Maps, I think you can see it. So anyway, the marine railway that was over there was relocated down onto the one at the end of the waterfront walkway. So what I'm going to do, I'll pass around some more photographs. So again, thanks to Bill Merrilee's book on Newcastle Island. And I'm highlighting here the salteries.
I believe that there are a lot of dates associated with the cemetery, and you can glean a lot of the date information from some of the headstones.
Right, absolutely. Yes, thank you for that. So here's, I'll pass this around. It's an aerial shot, thanks to the Nanaimo archives. Also some photographs out of Bill Merrilee's book, that's this one, which shows the herring fishing in this area, which was very big at one point. And you'll see from the photographs when you look at them, they were catching a lot of herring in this area. Okay, we're all okay. We're just a leisurely stroll. Just where that brings us to the other side of that tree. So if you look at it, if you've got the map and there's a little white circle indicating that location, that's the Pacific Biological Station. Can everyone see what I'm pointing over there? So that's the oldest fisheries research centre on the Pacific coast. Gord, one of our board members, Tom Gord, he used to work there for many, many years, so he'll be able to add. Now, it was established in 1908.
Okay.
Well,
Well, a little bit of geography, I guess. The first building, which was built by the Reverend Taylor, who was the first curator. He was, his son, interesting enough, was the fellow who was involved in the creation of the Lionsgate Bridge. So we have a connection to that. The two buildings, actually, the big buildings that you see there, there are actually two stages of the construction. The one on the left was built about 1970, the one on the right about 1950. The original building was a wood frame and it sat up on the hill behind that.
That's the stand. Original.
No, the original way actually it was just wood frame, and the reason they had to take it rebuild something was it was falling apart. That's one.
Yeah, okay, I'll pass this around so you can see what it was like in 1908, I guess. So I just note here that by 1958 there was 46 permanent scientific staff. And then on top of that, I think you had the support staff. So by then it was a big operation. And they built a new building in 1949 called the Clemens Building.
And that's the one on the right here. You can kind of see it. No, that's on the left. Yeah. The left building, we call that the Taylor Building. It's named after the Reverend Taylor. And that was built in 69-70.
And Clemens was a director for many years.
So, yeah, well, he worked here and then he became the director and then he moved on to UBC to become the head of the biology.
So I'll pass this one round. Also, this is a current photograph, and you can see the Clemens Building marked on that. And as Will pointed out, you've got to know what you're looking at. It's the one kind of on the right-hand side, which actually goes back. Good. Any questions about the Pacific Biological Station? Because Will's the man.
It's still very important, isn't it? I mean, it still does a huge amount of work.
Yeah, it's the principal marine fisheries research facility for the federal government on this coast.
And as a point of interest, the 100-year anniversary was in 2008, and Gord here gave a talk to the Newcastle Historical Society about the Pacific Biological Station to celebrate the 100 years. And that is actually available if you know how to download it.
Well, yeah, it's on the VIU space.
Okay, so the next stop is
the story. There's a book on Piper's Lagoon which had some of that on it.
So next stop is down by just opposite where the drip is, and there's some panels there describing the geology of this area.
We're going to move to the next stop.
So we're moving on. At your leisure, you can look at them, but they talk about the geology of this area. So we're going a little bit back in time, and if you look at the rocks there, like Sugarloaf, so they're of a certain age, which is something like 250 million years old. They're volcanic rocks and they're basaltic lavas, so volcanic rocks. So if you look at that there, and then if you look at that island there, or say Suction, they're much younger in age. They're something like 80 to 60 million years old. They're sedimentary, and that's where the coal came from. So over there, and including those islands, you've got sandstones and conglomerates and the coal beds, of which the Newcastle, as you know, generated a lot of industrial activity. So if you can imagine, there's a line that goes just in front of the Sugarloaf there, right down through the water, and it represents some 150 million years in age difference. Completely different rocks. And if you're really interested, when you drive up the highway, you can actually see the boundary. It's called an unconformity. where Jingle Pop comes into the parkway, as you're going south towards, say, 5th Street, with VIU on the left, if you look on the right hand side, and I'm going to pass this around so you'll probably recognise the cutting, you can actually see the boundary between the two rock types, basaltic lavas and sedimentary rocks. And as I mentioned, that line there represents maybe 150 million years of time interval. So look, I'll pass that round. So that shows you the fault, and on the back here, actually is a picture of the rock cutting on the parkway. But that's very old, and now of course this come much closer to time, and as it's explained on the panels there, we had the ice age come, and that caused the ice apparently was something like 3 kilometers thick in this area, and that depressed the ground downwards. And at the same time, of course, a lot of the water, seawater, was being locked up in ice, so that caused the sea level to drop. So you had two competing things. The land was being depressed and water was being taken up as part of the ice. So the sea level was quite a bit lower at one point. And then of course you got the ice melting, the ice age was disappearing. So now you got more water and so the sea level rose. And because the ice had melted, that depressive load had gone, so the land was rebounding. So this area here has seen quite a lot of sea level changes because of that. Now, it's explained some on that plaque there, but also I'll pass this around, which sort of shows you when this whole area was covered in ice, and then it shows you the ice retreating, and then it shows you that this area here was actually a big island because the sea level, relatively speaking, was much higher than it is today. So the sea of water was right through there. So I'll pass this around anyway, and you can see at different time intervals. 17,000 years ago, this is all ice. 14,000 years ago, the ice started to retreat. 12,500 years ago, there was no ice, and this was all water. And just there's a nice little schematic here of what this area used to look like when the sea level was relatively much higher than it is today.
When you say much higher, how much higher?
Well, I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think there's a lot of sand, sand and gravel pits. You know, that used to be the old beaches. So with, I don't know, 50, 60 meters higher. And of course, when the sea level was much lower, it enabled migration of people. So hence you got the First Nations coming in and settling. A lot of the Dave, where's Dave? So I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the original settlements are now in fact submerged because they were before when the sea level was much lower, and as the sea level rose, they're submerged. So I think there's an underwater archaeologist sort of look at that. Do you want to add anything, Dave?
Yeah, no, that's the exact truth. It has changed. We have photos of our present day reserve, and the houses were where it's now the beach. The houses were all the way back here, going back 3 rows of houses. 1 row is considered a village, but this area here from the 7-Eleven all the way to the end of the house had 3 rows of houses here. So several thousand people lived in this area.
By the hospital.
Yeah.
Go ahead and repeat it.
So by the hospital, Gord's explaining there are the remnants of an old beach. So I don't know how much higher that's 100 meters or something higher than here, where the hospital is. So yeah, a lot of sea level changes, and as I mentioned, a lot of the sand and gravel pits are the old beaches. So I'll pass this one around. This shows you what this area was thought to look like 10,000 years ago. And yet there's 9 here. The Millstone, it's called on here the Millstone Channel. It was like the Newcastle Channel. It was a sea channel. And I know, and Dave can probably talk more on this, but I know on Gabriola they have dated human remains at 1,000 years ago. So yes, I mean there have been people living in this area
on Salish Island, on the east side of the island trail. They analyze the soil, and it's been continued use for over 5,000 years.
Wow.
We've been here a long time. Yeah.
But, you know, other parts of the coast are 10, 12,000.
Usually 14,000 in the north end, 17,000 further down. I've been here a long time. Travel by
Any questions about the geology, the old geology, or the relative to new geology? If not, we'll go on. So the next stop is going to be by the sculptures, the First Nation sculptures down there. That's our next
Ted,
stop.
you talked about panels. Are those the panels there?
Just here, the geology is explained more on these panels here.
Unveiled in 2018 by Willie Good and his son Joel Good, and the carvings have some very significant items in them. On this side here, can anyone see what this is in the center of her blanket here? Okay. So you can see what this is in the center of the blanket. It's a paddle for canoeing, and so it's showing that the individual that's here, so it'd be a lady and a man, and she's waiting for family that are coming on canoe. And so when she comes to the shore with her paddle, she's showing the people and the people around that she's ready to go out on the sea. She's either going to go and travel and meet her family, or she's waiting for her family. So it's very significant to have that on it. Can you see what the other items are here on the sides of the blanket? The fish. This channel right here was very busy with fish, and we still have some Chinook coming in the fall, and they're in the waters here. A lot of people fishing for them. But it was a very busy place for the fish, and our people that was a big food source for us. To go further up, and then that's a Swahili mask. In the Coast Salish culture, we only have one mask, and that's a Swahili. We have several versions of it, and because their family descends from the Swahili also. Up above is an eagle. Eagle, as we call them, the watchers of the sky, and they're always over top of us looking, checking on us to make sure we're okay. And that's what we've always had a belief of, that the eagles are not in the bad way, they're looking after us. Can anyone guess the figure in the center? Yeah, a frog. We call it a wakus. Wakus means a sign of renewal. You'll see many totem poles or welcome poles at the universities, and they always have a frog on the bottom, because a frog means that there's renewal coming. Yesterday I had a tour on Salish, and it was all VIU students, and when we were walking through the forest, the frog started calling, and I said, can you guys hear the frog? You guys are going through renewal, and this is what the sign. He's singing to you to let you know. So if you're ever walking in the forest and you hear a frog calling, that message is for you, that there's a renewal coming.
Could you tell me what is that the thing that the person is holding?
Okay, that's a rattle, and that's made from the scallop shells. And you see the Shell gas station symbol, that shell is the same kind of shell as this, the scallop. And we would collect these or trade them from other areas, and those were used as rattles together, shaking them together. And there's always a significant connection to that Swahili mask. It's a very sacred thing, so this is one of the very few poles that will have a Swahili mask on it. Because like I said, we only carry one mask in the Coast Salish. My ancestors carried them also, as well as their families. Looking to the other side, can anyone see the bird? What the bird is on the top? Raven, yeah, or even also known as a cormorant from the area here. They look very similar to a raven. But the thing with the cormorant, see how his feathers are, his limbs are reaching down to the bottom of his feet? Cormorants, you'll see them on the posts often doing that, because that's their way of drying themselves off, because they have to stretch their wings out to dry themselves. Because they swim in the water, if there's no oil comes from their skin, their feathers become waterlogged, and then they have to dry themselves off before they can get back in again. Very significant with the frog in the center. Further down, the man that's there with the pole, with the blanket or robe in front of him. You can see what's on each side of the robe. Anyone guess what that is?
There.
On each side, wolves. Yes, they come from the wolf clan. what little bit of that story was, the wolves came to the river, in the Snuneymuxw River, from my side of the family, on the Snuneymuxw River on the west side. And they went back and forth several times and then decided to swim across. And the water was very swift and very cold. And when they came to the other side, they came up as the first two humans, as a blade of grass, is the word. The family that hears the goods, they come from the wolves. They descend from the wolves. That's their crest. And see, that's very important. And the moon is the grandmother moon on the very bottom. The other question about it, I hope I'm giving you a good interpretation of it. The family does have a more detailed interpretation, and there is some online if we look it up online too.
There's a large face above the wolf.
Yeah, that's the see, the robe is where the red lines are. That's a robe wrapping around that person, and that's the face. That's the man, and the woman is over here. So maybe husband and wife family. And the big thing about our families was whenever we went to a potlatch, we would be in hopes that we would marry our children to that village to bring our families stronger. When the Europeans came here, we shook hands with them in the harbor here. They passed the common cold on to us we didn't have. From 1860 until about 1940, we lost 96% of our people. Went down to 240. We've now built back up, we're around 2,000 people, but because of all the other bloods that also helped. My father's English, so my father has 1,000 years more of English history. I hope I'm giving you some good information, bringing a light to some of it, and sometimes making it a little bit happy too. Bringing a little bit of happiness to it is important. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Remember to say
clapping. So now we're clapping. Now we're going to do it. Okay, right. Okay, so there was the lines in Wellington were developed. So between 1872 and 1901, there was a railway line that went down here, and there were wharfs, 3 wharfs. Now you can see the berm on which the wharf was built. You can actually see the remains of the pilings.
Yeah.
If you look right now, that closer one, you can actually see them sticking out. So those would have been the wooden pylons that held the ship against some 20 or 30, 20 metres, I guess, higher at a higher elevation, and then the ships would come in. And so we do have a good one here. I'll pass that around, showing what the wharfs look like. So you can imagine back in, they closed in 1901, so that period, late 1800s to 1901, this was a hive of activity. There'd be ships coming in and loading with coal for the Royal Navy, but also a big part of the market was down to San Francisco, where it was then transshipped to other vessels that needed the coal. And I'm not sure, even Valparaiso in Chile was a big place for ships to dock and then load up with supplies, so maybe some went down there as well. So, I mean, the picture's going around, just imagine this is a hive of activity, railway lines coming in, the wharfs were there, and then Robert Dunsmuir, who sort of got the coal going, his son, he had a house which was located right there, called Keeley House. And I got pictures of that which I'll pass around. So that got demolished in the 60s, went into disrepair, but that location used to be where the Dunsmuir house was. What I'm going to pass around now is a map from Robert Turner's book, which shows that this wasn't just the only coal wharf in Departure Bay. There was there was 4 coal wharfs in Departure Bay at one time. Here's a map showing where they were.
So the water level must have been a lot higher.
No. This is
Really, just like this.
Yeah, just like this. The tide's out right now.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting facts about the early railway line coming down is that in fact the coal was hauled by horses on wooden rails. And this shows the horses anyway, and then they converted after a couple of years into metal rails they call them tractors, and then they bought locomotives. And one of the famous photographs exists is where we have Robert Dunsmuir, the founder, And as you know, he financed the Carridock Castle in Victoria, very wealthy, E&N Railway, etc. But there's a famous photograph here of one of the two locomotives that they bought. One was called the Duchess and the other was called the Duke. Very famous photograph. That just gives an indication of the activity here. And that locomotive is actually, that one in that picture, they should go around together, is actually, it had a life after the mines, and eventually it was put on show in Carcross in the Yukon. So if you look at the two together, you'll see an old photograph here, and then you'll see where that locomotive is located today. There's another one showing the activity going on around here. And these pictures here are of the old Dunsmore house, which became known as the Kiwi house. But there's one when it was in good condition, and the other one when it was ready to be demolished. Okay, there's one last thing I'd like to talk about, and that's another reason why we came on a day when the tide is low, and that's to do with the fact that there is a sewer collector line in the beach here. And you can see, if you look down the beach, you'll see there's some concrete manholes and access to the pipe. And I've got some photographs here of it under construction. So I'll show you around. So can you imagine that under here, and there's a very good photograph of this area here, that photograph includes this wall. You can see this wall in the photograph of them digging a big trench along the beach to put in pipes that were something like 5 feet in diameter.
Is that what those people are standing on right
Yeah, so where those people, that's great. Good timing. Those people are standing on one of the access points into that collector sewer.
And the other one is the next one?
Yeah, you can see them as you go around.
Where does it go?
Sorry?
Where is it going?
Yeah, okay, so if you look behind me over here, and there's a picture of it, there's a pumping station just here. So all the sewage and that flows down under gravity, I guess, and it's collected. And from here, and you can see the sign there, it is pumped to the treatment plant.
What year was this project?
This would be the 70s. You can try and work it out from the vehicles that are in the... You should see the boat. And I have to thank... Where's Christine? Christine? Yeah. Thank you, Nanaimo Archives, for providing access to the photographs of the beach here.
When was the theme on the jam?
Lara, Good, Susan, a lot of you are aware of it, some may not. For those that aren't, the offering free membership to people on this tour. So if you're not a member, as soon as you've got the forms, you can sign up. There's no cost.